Good afternoon. My name is Luigi Petito. I'm the head of secretariat at the European Alliance to Save Energy. I'm very pleased to kickstart the second part of this European Energy first edition of European Energy Efficiency Day that already this morning presented three very interesting sessions with the very high-level speakers, and now we are moving into the second part, which will start with this session that is making industry fit for 55. In the framework of these discussions, we have 75 minutes. We will be looking at to highlight the potential of energy, water, resource efficiency as a driver of decarbonization and competitiveness of the European industry. And we will try to do this with a panel of very distinguished speakers that have kindly accepted to be with us this afternoon. So let me introduce the speakers very briefly. We have Emilio Tenuta. Emilio is Chief Sustainability Officer at Ecolab, and among other roles, he is also chair of the board of directors of the World Environment Center, and also sits on the leadership council of the Corporate Eco Forum. Among his tasks, he has been and his work revolves around the advancing the ESG criteria within the company. And maybe Emilio, when you will start your presentation, maybe you can also tell us more about Ecolab. Then we have Michele Rimini. Michele is a program leader on industry, transition and trade at E3G. At E3G is one of the most influential environmental NGOs on a global scale. Michele, prior to joining E3G, Michele worked for a few years for the OECD, but he has also taken part on this very topic of the implementation of structural reforms and in the frame and strategic guidance for industry for other organizations, including preparation of negotiations at G20 level. And then we have Eike Leberle. Eike is a German, currently energy policy advisor for the Greens EFA Green Group in the European Parliament. Eike has more than a decade of experience in both the design and the negotiations of major energy policies and regulatory files. And we are also waiting for a representative from the European Commission, Mrs. Maïve Rute. Probably she has currently some problem with the connection. She will be with us very soon. Maïve is a Deputy Director General at DG Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs at the European Commission. Her work focuses on green transition of industries, resilience of supply chain, promotion of investment, and IP rights. In June 2022, very important, the European Commission nominated Maïve the first ever Chief Standardization Officer in the European Commission. I hope she will be with us very soon. So without any further ado, as I said, we have 75 minutes and several inputs to and several interesting topics to discuss. I would like to give just a couple of rules for housekeeping rules for this meeting, for this webinar. So the session is being recorded and will be available after will be uploaded on the European Alliance to Save Energy website. We are also live on Twitter, and this is very important. If you have questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So not the chat, preferably the Q&A, so also our speakers can check the questions and they can help me perhaps to filter and to decide who is answering what. Okay, so let's start this exchange. Maybe we can start with first of all with an icebreaker, a bit of a warm-up question for all the with a very short, concise answer, let's say 45, 60 seconds, just for a tour de table. So my question for all of you is, how can we make European industry fit for 55, and what is the role that water, energy, and resource efficiency can play as the driver of decarbonization and competitiveness? I'd like to open to give the floor to Michele. Maybe Michele, you can kickstart the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Luigi. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you and all the panelists today at this very important conference. I'll start by saying that making industry fit for 55 requires creating the enabling condition for having for industry to have the right incentives to decarbonize. That encompasses addressing technological, financial, and market demand aspects. In that, efficiency in production, especially at the level of inputs, being that water, energy, or other resources, is a key component, and it really starts with company desires to augment productivity and reduce costs. For government budgets, this is also a cheap solution, as it can be incentivized with price signals and regulation rather than throwing money at the problem. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Very good, Michele. Emilio.
Thank you, Luigi. Good day, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I think, Luigi, your question is so important, taking measures to help bring what we call this transformational change to Europe, needed really to support the economy, society, and industry in the future to get to our net zero 2050 goal, and of course, emissions reduction of 55% by 2030. I mean, it's going to take a concerted effort by everyone's part, but it can be done, and industry can play a role. And hopefully today we can demonstrate the important role that we can play around both decarbonization and competitiveness. And I think it's important to know right at the beginning that there doesn't have to be trade-offs, as Michele just said. We can achieve both business and sustainability results. And the reason we're so optimistic at Ecolab is water efficiency and reuse are key to decarbonizing our transition over the next decade. And mainly because water and energy are intertwined. And so we see this as a big opportunity, especially in Europe, where industrial use at times is much greater than some of the other developing countries when you look at the mature markets that we're in. And so I think this is a great opportunity, especially now, given the challenges that we're seeing with the energy crisis. So Luigi, just a few thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Emilio. I agree. I mean, this is a very, very timely discussion. Eike, please.
Yes, also from my side, thank you very much for having me here at this event. And I would precisely start where Emilio has stopped. So I would also say that the current energy crisis is actually accelerating the necessary step changes and to make industry not only fit for 55, but probably even the driver of it. I would argue that this crisis has shown once more how everything is interlinked, how industry is impacted, our society is impacted, and has exposed our vulnerabilities, not only to fossil energy prices, but also to global supply chain disruptions. And if we have the right support for the industry to make now the sustainable investment decisions, we can really guarantee the competitiveness, resilience, sustainability, and here indeed then water, energy, and resource efficiency are key.
Thank you very much, Eike. And I think we can. You have based on what you said. I mean, this really fits very well with what would be my now first question for the next tour of with the speakers. So again, going back to Michele. Eike mentioned prices and the crisis, energy crisis, which is obviously we have several crises, the energy, the climate, there are too many crises, unfortunately. But focusing on what is going on with the prices, how will the energy crisis and high gas prices impact industry decarbonization efforts? And can the current context help accelerate the transition to clean-powered and efficient industry? The floor is yours. It would be great to hear your consideration and reflections on this point.
Thank you, Luigi. I agree that we are living in a world of polycrisis, different type of crisis and different aspects that we're facing, our societies are facing. That being said, I think that the energy crisis is both an opportunity and challenge for decarbonizing the industry. And it is an opportunity as insofar as it shows the necessity to move away from fossil fuel dependency, because there is a clear problem of sustainability in terms of cost. It is at the same time a challenge, as it really reduces the margin to invest in cleaner technology and puts industry viability at risk. That's also an element that I think it's important to highlight. Specifically on the gas crisis, we already see that industrial consumption has been decreasing significantly in EU member states. For example, in Germany and in Italy, gas demand in industry has decreased by 21% compared to last year. And in some economies that has decreased by 50% even. I think this can be good news in as much as gas reduction are driven by improvements in efficiency and are not compensated by fuel switching, short-term fuel switching solution. That is, you're moving away from gas, but you're using coal instead, for example. The objective should be there to incentivize long-term and permanent gas demand reduction to adopting greener technology, greener alternatives that can deliver that. And these solutions are also a safer return on investment for companies, as prices are expected, gas prices and energy prices are expected to remain high in the foreseeable future. And of course, this is very much in line with our climate commitments. There is a clear opportunity now for decarbonization through electrification, because this is the most desirable option for medium and heat industrial processes. Whereas for high temperature industrial processes, the solutions evolve around hydrogen, but then availability is a problem as the scale is not there yet. In terms of economic harmony for a structural shift towards electrification are the relative prices of gas and electricity. And that is to this end, decoupling really gas from electricity prices is essential. And we'll see what happens with the current negotiations at the EU level. Last but not least, policymakers are really walking a fine line between keeping the prime signals to incentivize decarbonizations and avoid a complete shutdown of the industries. Wherever possible, measures will be taken to support both objectives, with, for example, green conditionality instruments for support that facilitate the adoption of new technologies, and also focusing on energy efficiency by implementing energy audits or energy management systems, and therefore driving through energy and efficiency improvement without investment, significant investment. So it's a problem that can be addressed in two different ways mostly. I'll stop here and back to you.
Thank you, Michele. Now we can come back to some of the points that you mentioned after with some further question. I move then to Emilio to get like a different perspective, so to get the perspective of the industry. Emilio, I would like to ask you, can smart water management help support the industry effort to become more sustainable and to reduce energy consumption and emissions? And while answering, can you please share some examples, some case studies? Can you give us some, because it is important for us and those that are following to really understand that there are some concrete examples, there are some existing available technologies that can help in this challenge, to address this challenge. Emilio, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Luigi, for that question, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what I'd like to cover with everyone today, and I'll share some slides in a moment, but the current water and energy environment that we're in Europe is a conundrum. And so the question is, how can we build a roadmap to resilience while we also lead this transformational change on energy over the next decade? And to your point, Luigi, digital technologies are key and are available today. We don't have to go to the moon to really drive proactive water, energy, and emissions reductions that we need to support our transition. So a little bit of background. The energy crisis obviously has seen, as we heard earlier, a catalytic moment. Energy prices, depending on where you are in Europe, are 10x year over year. The EU is considering options to cap gas prices in response to the soaring energy costs. And so the energy crisis is obviously a factor. But as we look at this, what I'd like to be able to do is to kind of share, while we've been going through all this, if that's not enough, we're also dealing with some other challenges, which I'll share my screen for a moment to share with everyone the implications of the water crisis that's going on today. And hopefully you can see my screen now. This to me is alarming. When I look at year over year, the Europe Drought Observatory portal that actually shares a drought monitor of Europe. And when you look at the way water stress, something we did not predict, that water stress, meaning quantity and quality, are a challenge, as well as access in some parts of Europe. This is a big problem, in addition to the energy and geopolitical challenges that we're facing. And so to me, this is something that where we can't address the energy crisis in isolation. And so to Luigi's point, at Ecolab, we really feel strongly that you can save water that leads to energy savings, that also reduces CO2, as Michaela talked about, and costs. Obviously, with where we are with the energy crisis, the cost savings are significant. But it's also about driving other benefits around water stewardship, around asset preservation, about managing compliance. All of these things that don't have to be at odds, you can achieve them in combination. And what we've seen from over 500, we call total plant assessments. These are water and energy audits that we do across multiple sectors of industry. We see on average about 38 to 44% water conservation opportunities, of which there are 18 to 22% thermal energy savings, and in some cases 3 to 4% electrical savings, and a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that could lead to somewhere between 12 and 15%. Now, to Luigi's point, let's bring this home with a real example and highlight this. One of the largest, world's largest steel mill group in the world, ArcelorMittal. This is an example where they are committed at ArcelorMittal to driving the environmental stewardship and delivering sustainable products to their customers. And they partner with Ecolab really to be able to optimize. In this case, this is an example of a steel mill operations in Romania that leveraged a smart technology called 3D Tracer that is a smart technology that allows for remote sensors throughout the critical water circuits in their operations, their critical cooling, utility, heating, process systems, that enables them to manage the water quality variability in where they operate. That leads to not only efficiency when it comes to water reduction, which, as you can see here, 8.3 billion liters of water savings at one mill, but also the impact that has to reducing energy that led to the greenhouse gas emissions of over 1,200 metric tons of CO2 avoided, and also the cost savings that you see here. Ultimately, there was a significant value to that savings, all while maintaining their resilience during a water and climate constrained world. So Luigi, this is an example of how we can connect proactive water management to helping us transition over the next decade.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emilio. Very, very nice slides. And I think the numbers there and the figures from your slides are talking by themselves. I'd like to continue now with Eike. Eike, another perspective. Of course, you have been, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, you have been really designing and contributing to the design and the negotiations of major policy and regulatory files in the European Parliament. And there is now several pieces of policies files under discussion, under revision. Can you give us the let's say can you tell us what is going on in the European Parliament and what indeed the European Parliament is doing and intend to do to fully realize this potential, this water energy nexus potential in particular? There are, as I say, different files open, the Industrial Emission Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, very soon, Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive that was discussed in another session this morning. Maybe there is a lot of opportunity there that we shouldn't miss. Maybe you can give us an overview. Maybe let's start with one of these, let's go policy by policy, and we take this in 3 rounds over this discussion. Eike, please.
Yes, okay. I'll probably start with the Industrial Emissions Directive because this seems to be so linked to what we have just received as figures from Emilio, and I really would hope that this is considered in the upcoming revision. So we have the Environment Committee being in the lead of this directive in Parliament, and a draft report will be available on the 27th of October. It will be in the hands of Mr. Kanev from the EPP, who has also led the work on the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So I think he's very much aware of some of the links between energy and water industry and so on. So I think that's good news. Well, we don't know yet the views of other political groups, but from the Greens, it's clear that that the energy water nexus will be in the focus. We know that more than half of the water abstracted in Europe is used for industry and energy production alone. So the water management is here very much in the focus. And if we can save energy and greenhouse gases and water and money with a good management, that's definitely the way to go. So would like to enlarge a little bit the scope of the directive that currently rather looks into the prevention of pollutant release by industry into the water, to topics such as an improved framework, that you have ambitious standards on water consumption, efficiency, reuse, clearly defined by environmental permits. I think it's also good if industries really have to think about improvement of their water consumption, like in the Ecolab project, so that they can really integrate those approaches in their transformation plans and environmental management systems. So yeah, this is a little bit what we will look into the discussions on the Industrial Emissions Directive.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eike. We'll come back to cover the other files a little bit later. I'd like then to go back to Michele. Michele, first of all, before you mentioned you made some references to audits and green conditionalities. Maybe you can give us some more details on that. But otherwise, I wanted to ask you, what are the main challenges and opportunities that the European industry is facing in the transition to decarbonization? But before giving you the floor, Michele, I see that Mrs. Maive Rute has joined us. Maive, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. We have started the discussion. I've introduced already yourself before in your current role, and I will come back after this intervention from Michele. I will come back with the first question for you. Thank you very much for being with us, Michele.
Thank you, Luigi. I'll first answer the question and then maybe provide some reflections on the 2 points that you just raised. I think that the current energy crisis, as I mentioned before, is a key challenge, as it really shifts the industry mindset from thinking about long-term efficiency and growth to a survival and a risk aversion mentality. Decarbonization becomes again another burden on the industry rather than an opportunity for growth. And to echo what Emilio was saying, I think that the good news is that we now have most of the technologies that are needed to decarbonize the European industrial base, whereas in the past, these technological solutions were not really developed enough. It now really becomes a question of having the resources to invest in new technologies, share them, and ensuring that they are sufficiently diffused. The second point really relates to having financial resources to make investments in these technologies and being at the right moment in this industrial investment cycle. With reduced margins, the space to invest in these technologies is limited, and government financial support is absolutely essential. With industry having long investment cycles, it is important to provide incentives to investments when carbon-intensive assets are close to retirement for it to maximize the business rationale for the investments. And there is also the need to reduce the perceived risk of investing in new technologies by providing some certainty about future market opportunities for green products through, for example, green public procurement policies. The last element I want to bring to the discussion is the fact that industrial decarbonization can actually reshape the balance of powers among players, with sectors and companies that will inevitably decline and others that will thrive. This creates important political headwinds to decarbonizations and can potentially raise social tension from those that are mostly affected to potential closure of more polluting plants, but can also be looked as creating important employment and social opportunities for those industries that will thrive. And therefore, it's necessary to ensure that the transition is also looking at the just aspect of it. That is, we need to make sure that this does not create social unrest. Then I think I was talking about green conditionality on support, and I think that this is key because there is this tendency of just providing support nowadays, with companies striving for saying we are about to go under, we need support, we cannot do anything else. But then yes, governments will provide support, but this should not be an unconditional one, because then it's just a matter of cushioning losses and there's no long-term perspective to that. And so that will be very much important in any support measure that's provided by government in that sense. And also there are important internal competitiveness issues related to that, in that you need to provide support that is targeted to certain goals, not general support. And again, I think I will make these points. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michele, to bring about this different important dimensions into the discussion. I'd like to go then catch up with Maive. Maive, what are the Commission's plan to make the industry able to deliver on energy and climate targets? We would really appreciate your views on this point.
Well, thanks a lot, first of all, for your patience, since I had to, in fact, move to a different computer. My office computer finally did not agree to work with me this afternoon. So I am now connecting from my assistant's laptop. So thank you for having had this patience indeed to wait for me to find a different laptop. Now, as to your question, of course, the question is very broad. And as you know, Commission has the normal tools we have. We have our regulatory activities, we have the finance and all these kind of support measures from grants. And then also, of course, the organizational, so to say, convening power. And maybe I'll mention a few things here and there which highlight maybe the latest, most important elements in this field. As to the regulatory side, you certainly are all aware that greening and decarbonization of industry remain very high in the policy agenda. And In addition, of course, the current energy crisis is making us even more aware that we need to speed up the transition towards renewable sources. So this, of course, is very much the music of the day, and Commission is looking into opportunities of really making it happen. So if you look into, for example, this Repower EU communication and the following activities we are now putting in place, I think it's really remarkable that we are now taking such important steps towards cutting the time it takes for permitting, for example. And we haven't yet delivered, but I think the thinking itself is already very important. That if we have a situation like we face now, we have to be able to act upon these interests, which are really a broad public interest. We have to be able to get the permitting issues sorted out. And I mean, 2 years is already quite long if we think that by 2030 we want to deliver really an important share of this transition already. So the permitting issue, which was very much in center, and I'm happy that this is moving. Also, you would have seen that we have allowed member states to look into their recovery and resilience facility to prioritize some of the energy related and decarbonization related projects, which maybe they did not put in the recovery and resilience facility before. So this has been a specific opening up of the recovery and resilience substantial funds, in fact, in order to address the energy crisis. So these elements, I think, are essential that we are accelerating the transition to green energy sources, and of course also giving money and public support to industry wishing to go through the decarbonization now. But then, of course, besides the funding coming from the Commission side, we have these very important opportunities from the member states. And you would have seen that the state aid framework has been made very much, I would say, much more flexible, taking really into account the current crisis background. So this temporary framework has been extended, the one we already had under COVID, and there is a lot more flexibility built in so that member states could provide support both for smaller as well as bigger companies in these times we are now living through. Then from the convening power, so to say, or the policy work that we are doing, maybe I'll mention some of the keywords that might be relevant here. You are certainly aware that we help the industries to go through the decarbonization also by supporting the value chain creation, this kind of a supply chain thinking. We, on one hand, supported by our analytical capacities and looking what it really takes to be resilient with the supply chains. And we have been working on this now for almost 2 years already, analyzing where our vulnerabilities are, where our dependencies are, and what needs to be done to really have a better standing there, how to diversify and how to also have production in Europe. So this supply chain resilience is kind of one side of our thinking. And then within Europe, particularly in the areas where we are lagging behind our competitors, or also in the areas where we know that this is where the clean tech kind of revolution is coming. We have put forward these proposals for alliances, and they, one after another, are now really taking shape. We have the Battery Alliance as one which has been very successful, and already you can see is bringing really investments into this new industry, if you wish. Similarly, hydrogen is mobilizing significant amounts of investments, and more than 1,000 players from various parts of Europe. We have just received the decision to launch Solar Technologies Alliance, which I think is also good news, since solar technologies is one of the areas where Europe used to be significant, and we have unfortunately lost our market strength to China over the last 10, 12 years. So we want to build some of it back. And we have, of course, also these developments in the areas of chips availability, you're certainly aware, and now also raw materials. So we are working with industry, and we are at the same time also mobilizing member states around this agenda to make sure that we are really all pulling in the same direction, because the times are different. It's not a business as usual time that we are living through now. One thing is the energy crisis, but also this overall geopolitical context that makes us really aware that we as Europe need to be standing more on our own feet than we perhaps have realized in the good years that we have had in the past. So on all this in the background, you can see it now coming. You can see this thinking coming. This kind of a push for more strategic yet open autonomy in Europe. You can see it in our international relations. You can see it coming even in areas such as standardization, and of course in our energy policy. With this, I will give it back to you now.
Thank you very much, Magda. A lot of food for thoughts. Really very interesting comments. Maybe before continuing and giving the floor to the colleagues, I just wanted to pick on a couple of just make a couple of reflections. I mean, I fully agree on the point on all the activities related, for example, to clean energy, and you mentioned rightly the issue of permitting. I mean, what the Commission is doing in that area is very much appreciated. I think I just wanted to because and actually Emilio, after maybe Emilio, you can put up that very interesting slides if you don't mind to put it up after when you will take the floor again, because Maive, there is also in synergy with the generation of clean technology. Indeed, we have now existing technology, most of them made in Europe, that can help industry to reduce energy consumption and reduce decarbonization. And I think I really think that the Commission is doing a fantastic job with the battery alliance, with the hydrogen. We're pushing on some let's say industrial, making some industrial sector or segments strategic. I think one of these strategic segments should be indeed the one related to energy efficiency, which is a little bit more different to define because it is so varied and broad. But indeed, because here we have several different technologies that can be applied in different branches, in different industrial segments. And I think on this very point, I would like to go back to Emilio, because Emilio, before you presented some very nice solutions and you gave us presented some case studies. I wanted to ask you now, because you presented one case with the steel industry, but I wanted to ask, can we apply those technologies, and which branches manufacturing segment offer the highest potential for water and energy saving measures? I think because we would like to understand indeed where we can apply this existing technology to make the difference in the current times. Emilio, please.
Yes, Luigi, I agree, and I think quite honestly, all industries can benefit. Water energy is the lifeblood of the economy and manufacturing, not only in Europe but in all regions. It's also, as we just heard, a value chain story, right? Whether you're in a data center that has to purchase electricity from a local grid where water is needed to produce that power. You also have to produce electricity using water. Power is also needed to manage the cloud in the data center, which requires water for the critical cooling of these servers to deliver the reliability that we need when it comes to the cloud. This is all about the value chain. There's a downstream implication to all of this, and this is true. I mentioned the power sector, but also the steel sector, which is obviously a feedstock to the automotive industry, which is so vital to Europe. The automotive industry uses steel for assembly. It also uses water in the assembly process. The consumers downstream use obviously water to manage their vehicle as it's during its useful life. What is I think very interesting is that to take another example of a vital industry today is let's take GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, global healthcare company. They discover, develop, and manufacture pharmaceuticals, vaccines, which are so critical from a health perspective. They're also very focused on not only managing and improving health around the world, but also a pledge to reduce its environmental impact by 2030 and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. So, you know, GSK sites in Europe and around the world have to maintain temperatures to safely produce and store products which are vital. That means that the steam systems, cooling systems, chillers, and other temperature-related systems must operate consistently, which often requires a lot of water and energy. And so when you bring together the expertise of the way they've partnered with organizations like Ecolab in our life sciences division, it's all about enhancing the cleaning and sanitation efficiency and what they refer to as clean in place, which allows them to operate and produce their vaccines and other pharmaceuticals without having to go down and making it more continuous. It's about utility efficiency and automation. So there's a number of critical areas that led for GSK to save more than 700,000 cubic meters of water annualized, but also the thermal electrical efficiency to reduce more than 200 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So let's not forget that every industry has an opportunity to really drive this water, energy, greenhouse gas connection that we've been talking about today. And it really enables us to really save also on costs, but also improve productivity in the example of GSK. And Luigi, let me just say one more thing. When you look at our organizations and industries like personal care, life sciences, health, there is significant water and energy used just from the cleaning and maintaining of their operations, which obviously can be done using much more effective technologies today that are digitally enabled to really support also the regulatory and safety requirements that are needed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emilio. Very interesting. Eike, coming back to you again, just to ask you for another view, another input on perhaps on the Energy Efficiency Directive and what is where we are with this directive in the European Parliament.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, here we now started trilogue negotiations just now with the Council and Commission. And exactly as Emilio has also presented, one of the key demands of the Parliament is to have energy efficiency being applied in several sectors. So in Article 3 of the EED, where we speak about the energy efficiency first principle, we want also specific mentioning of other sectors, including the water sector, which means that when member states design policy measures or ahead of any major investment decisions, energy efficiency first has to be taken into account. And that's a real priority for the Parliament. Emilio also mentioned data centers, so that's a specific concern as well of the Parliament, which was a priority also of the Greens. So we have introduced a new article 11A with an annex, even 7A in the directive, where we say that there needs to be a dedicated proposal on data centers, energy performance, and also their water usage effectiveness. So as latest in 2024, data centers need to disclose the water usage effectiveness according to SAN standards, and they should really be kind of implementing good practices and be obliged to comply with legislative norms once we have a proposal on the table at latest by 2025, hopefully. And this is not only because we should be energy efficient and water efficient, it's also because it's really just so much water that is being used by data centers. So the daily water usage of data centers, for example, the numbers that we get from the United States, they correspond to a town of 50,000 inhabitants. So it's really a huge challenge. And as we have heard before, in a climate where we have more droughts, where we really have water scarcity problems, the industry and especially data centers have to really deliver and make sure they can reduce more their consumption, reuse the water, and so on. Just to be complete, a third priority in this energy water nexus in the Energy Efficiency Directive of the Parliament is the mandatory energy audits. This has been mentioned before, and the multiple benefits it has, not only on energy efficiency, energy savings, but also on costs. So we really want to reduce the thresholds for companies that have to do the audits, and then there should also be more disclosure on what is the annual water consumption of the different plants, what it is compared to the previous year. That's obviously according to the member states legislation, how much they will require this, but we think transparency is a really good first step into making people aware and also show the opportunities that are there, not only for water savings or energy savings, but also cost savings.
Luigi, may I also add to those wonderful comments? I think you were spot on. Can I just also emphasize this point about this disclosure and transparency? I really believe, and what we've seen across industry wide, is that very point that there lacks the measurement when it comes to water and energy across a facility, if I go down to a site level. And that is not just one industry, across all industries in the value chain. We know the water coming into a facility, we may know the water meter coming out, but what's critical is what are the critical water circuits that we need to measure to be able to improve? Because obviously if you don't have the data, it's very difficult to manage your operations and ultimately improve it. And so this is a really key point that I think needs to be addressed moving forward. So I just want to echo those great comments.
Thank you. Thanks, Emilio, for adding to what has been said by Eike. I would like to then now give the floor to Maive. First of all, maybe for some reflections on what has been said, but then also at the prepared, I also wanted to ask you about the question more specific on energy intensive industries, because those industries have a huge stake in decarbonizing and a central role to play in enabling the decarbonization of industry as a whole. So I wanted to know how is the Commission acting on this, if there are some specific plans or initiative ongoing.
Thanks a lot. Let me actually continue from where Eike has just brought us in this thinking, because I think what we also really see appearing now, as always, the crisis is making us all think much more sharp about matters of resources. And I think this particular crisis we're now facing is not only highlighting the question of energy efficiency, but I think overall resource efficiency. My feeling is that the thinking about really this kind of a more resource efficient, circular kind of economic model is really coming forefront with this crisis we are facing. And this comes from the energy angle, but similarly from this fragility of the supply chains that I was mentioning before. Companies need to be looking into how they get the inputs, how they, in the very, very best way, utilize it. And I think also not only using what they have used in the past, but look into what already was brought up here by my fellow speakers, into the technology developments and automation and much better smart management of production processes. In the past, where perhaps we have had water as one of these abundant resources in Europe, maybe we were not so keenly aware, although, okay, regulation has been there, but maybe we were not so keenly aware of the need to also save on this side. And I believe as we now face more of these extreme weather events, even in countries like Norway, not having enough water for the hydropower any longer. I think these are really unusual circumstances that we are living through. So I think the awareness is there that we need to find ways through technology development and through this better, smart digitalized management of the processes to really find ways of saving both on energy side and on the water side. So from the Commission's, you know that we have, of course, the Horizon Europe program, which among other things also looks into the energy efficiency, be it resource efficiency from the water side, but also overall, I would say, input efficiency. And this is, I think, an important kind of building block in this overall picture. Secondly, I wanted to mention under the energy efficiency, particularly the work we do for the buildings. And as you well know, buildings is it's a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. And on this front, we have, I would say, kind of stepped up our work with construction sector to also see what this really thousands and thousands and thousands of companies who are in the construction sector, what they could actually do in order to improve the energy efficiency of the buildings beyond what we already put in place through the legislative arm again. So my thinking here is that besides the Green Deal, the rather extensive legislative package that comes, we need to be also looking into ways of helping it actually happen. So looking into ways how the industries can transform and providing the support there as well. One way how we do it is transition pathways. The transition pathways thinking is that we take our ambitious climate and environmental targets, and digital targets for that matter as well, and we discuss together with industry representatives and with member states what it actually takes to deliver and to deliver on time. And then you come to the questions of investments, by whom, where, how do we build this kind of supply chain and overall value added in Europe? Where do you get the skilled people? So the transition pathway is a way how we try to really zoom into what it takes. And for me, the energy efficiency of the buildings is among those where we are indeed looking into it, not only from the legislative side, but then exactly, I mean, we all know, try to find nowadays even sufficient number of construction workers or those who would be installing heat pumps and so on. We really have shortcomings even as to availability of labor force in this important transitional times. And maybe my last comment, you asked about specifically about energy intensive industries. We of course all realize that now this winter is particularly difficult for energy intensive industries. And a number of them have either already curtailed their production or they are partly closed. We, I think, need to be looking into this winter ahead of us with the I should have said this kind of a cautious idea in our mind that we need to avoid industrial terrain, these industries relocating away from Europe and taking, of course, many jobs along. So this winter is a bit particular. We, of course, want to help the industry go through the transition towards decarbonization, but at the same time, we have to make sure they really survive. And therefore, this mixture of state aid support, which member states who can afford it make available, plus, of course, also looking really how can one perhaps, even in the energy and gas markets, how can we make sure that our key industries would still be here also next year. This is really something one has to take also at a political level very seriously. And the kind of more maybe pragmatic tool that we had developed for decarbonization was exactly this pathway thinking, as I already mentioned, for construction sector, but similarly for the energy intensives, we go kind of economic sector by economic sector. There is a pathway now being prepared, for example, for chemical industry, but similarly thinking in terms of what it really takes. And maybe the point of maybe not really concern, but if you wish, kind of a point we have to realize is that for many of these energy intensive industries, their very first pathway towards lower carbon production will be electrification. So this means that the demand for electricity would, of course, will go up significantly. And in order to provide this electricity, we better really speed up the availability of renewable energy. Otherwise, we will end up having more of the fossil-based energy going into these industries. So the renewable energy availability and the cost of it, the affordability of it is really a key point for the energy intensive industries. And the second key point is hydrogen. For a number of these otherwise hard to abate sectors, hydrogen is one of these energy carriers that could be utilized. And you're certainly aware we have really major work ongoing through the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, where we look not only through the IPCEI, not only through the member states carried projects of common European interest, the so-called IPCEIs, but also we have launched a full platform of projects. We have something like 1,700 projects that are now listed at various, I would say, level of maturity, but also some small, some bigger, and they're all looking for investments. So we're really trying to kickstart the hydrogen economy in Europe, which would be directly then helping the heavy industries or energy intensive industries to go through these decarbonization times. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Maive. Indeed, it's a very, very complex situation. I think the challenge there is it's very much to be able to address this in the short term, the energy crisis without jeopardizing in the long term what has been done, in particular from the European Commission to address the climate crisis. I think finding this balance is the real challenge ahead of us. But I think, Maive, thank you very much also to bring in the discussion to the point of what we can do, because indeed with the last tour of last round of questions, I wanted to go to Michele and ask Michele what actions or also policies or whatever you believe it's necessary the EU and meaning like institutions and the broader sense stakeholders should prioritize to safeguard competitiveness and boost sustainability. I think give us some ideas or what do you think should be done?
Thank you, Luigi. I think that most of the elements that I wanted to introduce into that discussion has sort of already been discussed a bit by my comprehensive overview of what the Commission is doing in this space. So I'll try to be relatively brief on this one. I think that overall, decarbonization is an opportunity to boost competitiveness of the European industry in the longer term. The direction of travel has already been set, and societies have agreed that the long-term goal it's going to net zero, and albeit some economies may go at a different pace. And in the case of the EU, there are clearly also some disadvantages of being the first mover. As we all know, that climate regulations can impose burdens to industry that are not present in other jurisdictions. And in that sense, making sure that companies selling into the single market are paying a similar price for carbon is really fundamental. And this is exactly the principle around which the EU CBAM regulation has been designed. And also talks to the question of making sure that industrial production is not relocating elsewhere, that we maintain an industrial base in Europe, as well as alluded to. And I talked already about providing financial support, and that support needs to be given, but with some conditionality for not losing the target of aligning with the net zero goals. And again, we discussed this already, but the energy infrastructure is key. And we discussed about electrification. We discussed about renewables, and what is being doing, but what is being done by the EU through Repower EU is quite remarkable in setting more ambitious targets on renewables and more ambitious targets on energy efficiency. And of course, I would say that more needs to be done, and industry will say that it's too ambitious, but of course, the reality probably stays a little bit in the middle. So in that sense, there is a need to really look at renewables, look at hydrogen, look at electrification as the overall infrastructure that can provide for decarbonization in Europe, and at the same time preserving European competitiveness in a future where eventually all economies will have to align with net zero targets. And again, also I will finish with this last consideration on the fact that we live in a global market, despite the current risks on supply chains, the current backlash on international trade. And of course, there needs to be as much as international cooperation as much as possible in this area. And if cooperation is not possible, then other solutions that are like going, for example, going with like-minded countries, for example, in the form of climate clubs, that's also an option to consider in order to achieve the decarbonization that our economies and societies need. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michele. Maybe just one very, very quick comment on the point of conditionality again, because I think this is a very important point. And because you mentioned conditionality also and also Repower EU. We need to be very careful there. I mean, there is a point, there's an element of concern because what we are a bit concerned of the fact that the member states are given the possibility within their Repower chapter to waive the do not significant harm principle while defining this chapter. I mean, I think this is the kind of, probably this is one of those conditionality that we need to make sure that the resources are spent trying to find this very delicate, as I said before, balance between, okay, trying to address short-term problems, but also looking at the crisis of the crisis, or the big problem, which is climate change. And I think giving the possibility to member states to do this poses some issues, and we need to monitor this very, very carefully. Well, Emilio, coming to you, back to you, in terms of what we can do, how could better water management help overcome the consequences of drought on the industrial sector? I mean, we discussed this. You presented a very powerful slide at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, give also again your inputs on what can be done concretely.
Well, I mean, I think this is all about. We've been talking a lot about mitigation, given the crisis that we're in with energy and water in Europe. This is also about adaptation, and we're going to see more extreme weather, drought events that are going to be where climate will be expressed through water. It's incumbent on us to really begin to adapt to that changing climate. We need to rethink the water cycle, is what I like to think of it as, in the context of climate change, moving away from this flush and forget, and begin to find new ways, as you've heard from my fellow panelists, around leveraging things like gray water to manage the water scarcity challenge and quality challenges brought on by climate change for the industrial sector. And that smart water management, to your point, Luigi, is all about, you know, the approach that we enable through digital and IoT to help really drive resilience by reducing demand, increasing circularity, and enabling business to really become more resilient, right, as we continue to see these challenges. And that in turn drives business growth as we transition over the next decade to reaching our Fit for 55 target.
Thank you very much, Emilio, and then Eike, just to close this with this last round of questions before perhaps taking some questions from the Q&A function. Eike, would you like to tell us what is going on the last of the three files we mentioned at the beginning, maybe the Urban Wastewater Directive? Do you have any insight for us?
Well, we are of course waiting with impatience to the Commission proposal on 26th of October. But I think from the Greens priorities, one of the issues we would like to push is really this promotion of circular economy for water, by fostering urban wastewater recovery and promoting water use for agricultural, municipal and industrial uses. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And also, yeah, to mention that there are also opportunities, of course, that in sewage treatment plants, you can also not only become more efficient, use digitalization and so on, but also actually generate energy. Maive mentioned the increased electricity demand, and there's opportunities also for the industries and water management here to actually be part of this energy transition, to produce biogas or to install solar panels on their plants. They have the surfaces to actually use this. And then coming also to the buildings and energy efficiency in buildings, as mentioned by Maive, I think that's the next step. Also, industrial buildings, commercial buildings, non-residential buildings, they can all be part of this and also generate their own energy on site or shift the demand as it's useful. So there's a lot of good opportunities to actually not have burden on the industry, but really profit from the opportunities that are there from the energy transition and the necessary transitions that we have to see. Maybe just one issue on the pathways, on the different challenges mentioned there regarding the skills and the materials. My impression is that when we talk to industry stakeholders in the area of energy efficiency in buildings, construction industry and so on, is what is key for them is really the targets. This has also been mentioned by Michele. Once we know what the target is, we can really plan, we can have the pathway, we can know how much materials will have to be there and how much skilled labor has to be trained and reskilled to actually be there to implement those targets. So I would strongly advocate also for very ambitious targets on the energy performance of buildings directive, so that we know in which direction we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Heike. I got the final question for Maive. So, Maive, do you think, based on on the various inputs we received in this call, actually several different very good inputs. So, do you think businesses have a chance to survive and stay competitive without improving resource efficiency? I think this is probably the question of all the questions. So you have a...
Well, probably this is a question that doesn't even need to be asked. I mean, of course, we all understand that also to start with, the traditional industries need to become more energy efficient, and not only energy resource efficient. This is, I think, everybody understands that. But there are all these additional opportunities coming from many of the clean tech areas and these new renewable areas that we have discussed in this session. So I see it not only as an opportunity to become more resource efficient in the already established traditional sectors, but very much also opportunities to build full new sectors which maybe have not been there. And let me again build on something that Heike said, namely, we were discussing here the slush or the grey water, wastewater. Exactly, we have now launched work on producing more biogas, biomethane in Europe. Again, this is something that has existed and not been maybe so broadly used as it could be used, because we have a lot of waste water facilities, similarly landfills, similarly manure in the agriculture, which could be utilized more to produce this local biogas, biomethane. And in the past, perhaps the production costs were higher than the fossil fuels available in the market. But let's look at these things now, and also let's try to put the correct price on the carbon itself, taking into account all the environmental angles and transport costs and so on. So I see that, on some of this maybe a bit less known or areas which we haven't looked so much into. We also, as Europe, we have opportunities. And the biomethane producers are now saying they are going to, or they are trying to, put a kind of a tenfold increase in the production of biomethane in Europe between now and 2030, which is quite substantial. So again, this would need also industrial view at it. We have to produce this equipment, and of course somebody has to install it, and it has to all work. So that I see a lot of opportunities ahead. And maybe one element that I want to also still mention, which was a bit discussed, but maybe I should also from my side add, that is a very important role for the public authorities through public procurement and public auctioning of rights. And this should not be based on the lowest price always. Because we have in Europe still the tendency, and it varies a bit from one member state to another, but we have very much a tendency to go only for the price as a criterion and not look sufficiently in sustainability criteria, for example. So on this front, in my DG, we are in DG Grow, we are looking into also providing further, I would say, support or guidance to the member states authorities and training the contracting authorities in the member states so that they could see better how to build the either auctions or public procurements in such a way that environmental, social concerns would also be properly taken into account. And I think this can also make a difference.
Yeah, thank you very much, Magda. And I think you somehow have addressed one of the questions that I have here in the chat. Is there some ways for industrial plants to cooperate with local water utilities, municipalities to manage water, facilitating water reuse or reducing the need for treatment? I think you have approached this. Maybe Emilio, would you like to say something on this in relation to this question?
Luigi, I'm just looking at the question. Is this the
last one?
The local water utility? So yeah. I would say that, first of all, being able to focus on water being very much a local issue, because every watershed in Europe will be very different in many different ways in terms of quantity and quality. The opportunity, I think, for us is to really think about, and something that Heike had mentioned also, is the ability for us to update and modernize our infrastructure when it comes to water and municipal systems, that enables us to really have what I would refer to as a gray water infrastructure that enables us to minimize the amount of fresh water in industry that's needed for what I call fit for use purposes, that doesn't have direct contact for food and beverage and more of the sensitive areas where we don't want to use gray water. But there's a number of areas where gray water can be used to minimize the amount of fresh water being utilized, and having a common shared gray water infrastructure in Europe can go a long ways to helping us become more resilient in these challenges that we're seeing related to climate change.
Thank you very much, Emilio. I think I see we have other questions in the chat, but we could continue, I think, for hours to this very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, I need to close this session because we have the next session coming up in 15 minutes. So it will be about energy efficiency, first fuel to drive Europe's energy sovereignty, taking place from 3:30, so 15:30 to 16:45. I'd like to thank you very much for being with us, all the panelists. It was a very, very interesting discussion. I hope we can continue this discussion, hopefully in a physical edition of this energy efficiency, European Energy Efficiency Day, perhaps next year. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Bye.